بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Subhanallah, in this verse, Allah made an oath by the token of time, right? والعصر, time. But you know العصر, anyone memorizes Surah النبأ? أيوة عما يتساءلون. In it says what? وأنزلنا من المعصرات. Clouds are called what? معصرات, because they are squeezed. And time squeezes us. والعصر. All things that happen in our time, it affects on you. And it squeezes you mentally, physically, name it. And subhanallah, as I was saying, we have not yet got out from the shocking crime that happened in our own community. And let me say it, we are not immune. Social illnesses that happen out there, we are going to be affected by it in one way or another. And go to any police department, take a list of all acts of crimes, from small ones to major ones. You will see a number of Muslim names over there and Arab names. But this does not mean that we should stop doing our role as Muslims, as a masjid, as a center, as organizations, as professionals in their field. And today we are to talk about hate crime, we are to talk about domestic violence and mental, I would like to say it, mental wellness instead of mental illness. And we are joined by a number of prominent figures in our community that we are proud and happy and honored to have them with us here tonight. To my left will be the director of CARE Chicago office, Ahmed Rihab. As much as I say about Ahmed Rihab is not going to be enough. I would say he is our spokesman on behalf of the Muslim community and the media. And he does a good job. And we hope that he can produce مثل ما بيقولوا more Ahmed Rihabs in our community. Because the legacy of any leader is to make sure that he leaves people behind him that carries the message on. MashaAllah, you find him in all media outlets, a very good spokesman on behalf of the issues, if it was civil rights or if it was public involvement, and he is always invited to speak at Islamic centers, fundraisers, Muslim institutions. We are happy that he is joining us tonight, inshallah ta'ala. Wissam Shahid also, we are happy that we have him. He is a Cook County State Attorney's assistant and advisor on the policies that affect our community at large. He is also, just gave like a TEDx talk on criminal justice reform title, Does Justice Always Require a Conviction? He's also the finance director for the first Muslim and Palestinian American to be elected to the Democratic Party. We're talking about, of course, Akhuna Abdel Nasser Rashid. And will have more state representatives, inshallah ta'ala, in the future to come. To the far left, we have our sister Fatima Hashma. She's also a Cook County State Attorney, mental health specialist. And she is skilled in navigating legal process and connecting individuals with resources to aid in their recovery, inshallah, with extensive experience in mental health. And she is well versed in addressing trauma. My 3 minutes after introducing our guests, I'm going to limit to 3 messages that I just want to go straight forward to what we want to talk about. The message number 1 is about our homes should be places of tranquility and peace. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called our homes وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّن بُيُوتِكُمْ سَكَنًا, a place of residence and tranquility. We should not have any form of abuse in our homes. If it was mental, if it was verbal, if it was physical, not to go to the extent of criminal. I mean, this is something that was shocking, and what we've experienced with the Qasim family case, that it was the father who killed his own. Who would do that? Up till now, we are still trying to process how that happens. And it comes down to this small things. If we are sensitive to be cautious of how to prevent minor acts of abuse, then we are more sensitive to prevent and be immune from major acts of abuse and whatever it is. So this is also a month of Ramadan that is coming. of reflection of how can we educate our community to take care of their family members. Family members should feel safe, should feel secure, and this is our job to make sure that as a masjid, we want to bring programs that will produce better families, inshallah ta'ala. And it's not just about giving services to the community, it's also about moving them into al-islah, open the door for the sister. حدا خلي عينه على a lot of people are coming in. My second message is that hate crime is going يعني up and down, from political climate to statements by politicians, and you've seen it before, you know, in the campaign for presidency, and the actions taken by, unfortunately, our own previous president, to incidents that are infiltrated, you know, like by the media coverage, and the loss of Wadi' is one of the major, also shocking incidents that took place. So we want to make sure that we are able to bring awareness to that and keep educating how to do preventive measures in that. So that's why we have the guests with us here tonight. The last message that I want you to take with you home is a message of the best thing to raise a family, to make a role model community. We cannot change people. We can only change ourselves. And Allah said it very clearly. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. We can remind people. وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Our job is to remind people about the truth. But change, we need to teach ourselves. When we become the role models in families, that's how was the Prophet ﷺ. He was the role model, and people picked up from him. He did not have, like a power to change people. Like, it's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But with that being said, if we change ourselves to be better, inshallah, that will be a reason for our kids to be better, for our spouses to be better, for our neighbors, for the people we deal around them. We cannot, as we said, change. And Allah told the Prophet ﷺ, that we know that what people are saying is causing you sadness and sorrow. But what you need to do, to seek refuge in istighfar and tasbih lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With this being said, I'm going to move the mic to Akhi Ahmed Rihab. Maybe we'll go in whatever the sequence is, and we'll go from there, inshallah ta'ala.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you, Sheikh Kifah, for these wise words and for your kind words as well. And I just want to point out that I shut the door on the side there as a security measure. I do recommend that there should only be one main door that's open for events that are publicly marketed. It takes one lunatic to seep in very quickly with something in their pocket before anybody realizes what's going on. This is not to be paranoid, but we are living in challenging times, and we have to take every precaution we can. So I do recommend that we don't have side doors open for advertised events. Having said that, the topic at hand, hate crimes, is a subset of a larger conversation. Islamophobia and anti-Muslim acts that occur in this society that take many forms and many shapes. Hate crimes remain a small subset of that larger problem, but it's important that we understand what it is, what it's not, and what that larger problem is. Let me just say that in terms of incidents reported to CARE Chicago's office, we have seen an increase of 700% since October 7th through today, compared with the same period before that. That is probably the busiest we have been, including since post 9/11. And the reason is, in addition to the usual incidents, we now have a new subset of incidents. And these include censorship and retaliation, meaning that individuals who wish to speak out their conscience in what I would consider to be an exercise of freedom of expression are often, not often, but sometimes retaliated against by their employers or by their schools of their students, and sometimes even by their peers in a vigilante manner. We have had so many attorneys and members of the medical community, doctors and others who work at hospitals and in clinics, doctors and others who are members of professional societies who have reported such bias and such double standards and censorship and retaliation. Censorship is where they're prevented from speaking out their mind. Retaliation is where they're punished in some form after having done so anyway. This includes both speaking within the workplace and in their own free time on social media, and the latter is even more egregious. Within the workplace, one is allowed to speak their mind within the right context and in the right way of speaking. That doesn't create a chilling factor in the workplace. If other people are speaking about the topic, especially, one has the right to engage with their opinion and with pushback. The workplace should not be used as a space where you spew your feelings about a hot potato matter, a political matter, or a religious matter, or a culturally sensitive matter. But within the context of things happening, one can chime in. So that's a limited conversation. In social media, it's much more open. In your private life, it's much more open, where you have a right to express yourself. Obviously, responsibility is still the name of the game. There are red lines. One cannot, transgress into hate speech. You could technically, but it wouldn't be advisable. But yet, still, we see retaliation against individuals expressing themselves in their own private lives, and social media would be considered that. We have had employers and various organizations, schools and firms, issue letters immediately after October 7th, taking a stern and stark position of morality against terrorism and against the heinous acts that were committed against Israeli civilians, et cetera, and being very clear about providing resources for our Jewish colleagues who are affected by the said travesties and tragedies. And we've never had a problem with that per se. But then when we see 40 times the intensity and the brutality and the murder of civilians happening to the Palestinian side, we see very little action, sometimes no action at all, no letters of support, no resources provided for our Muslim or Arab or Palestinian colleagues and peers in the same institution. And so you're confronted directly here with a double standard. These are the types of cases that come to us that are above and beyond the usual, which still exists, that we saw since 9/11. So I just wanted to contextualize that as far as the high number. This includes each and every single incident reported to us. It doesn't have to be a hate crime. It doesn't have to be a hate incident. And I'll describe the difference between the two. It doesn't even have to be a direct civil rights violation. But it's any situation that I would describe as unfair or biased that targets Muslims, Arabs, or Palestinians as a result of them holding a position or even an identity that is essentially discriminated against in this manner. Now, there are many solutions for us to take. In egregious situations, we can sue, and we have some lawsuits actually pending. In other situations, we can try to mediate and basically engage with the employer or with the school or with the superintendent or with the teacher to try to get them to understand the situation, to reverse the situation, whatever retribution may exist, and to engage cultural sensitivity training. And we're doing that at the level of superintendents, not just principals and teachers. In others, we have templates of letters that can be sent to employers who've sent one type of letter but not another, to call out the double standard and how this makes the environment unsafe for the workers or for the students or for whoever is involved. There are multiple ways. So I still encourage the community to think of CARE Chicago as a resource for these incidents that go above and beyond hate crimes and hate incidents. But in terms of hate crimes and hate incidents is basically when someone says something to you or says something about your people or a protected class, whether it be a religion, race, ethnicity, disability, gender, these are all protected classes under the Constitution. If they say something that is hateful, that would be considered a hate incident. What makes a hate incident a hate crime? When it has a victim and when there's criminal intent coupled with intent of hate. So for example, if someone engages you in a physical scuffle and beats you up, let's say assault or battery, that's a crime. It's not a hate crime unless there is hateful intent. So you couple the crime with the intent for hate, that becomes a hate crime. Now, what if it's just hate, but there's no crime involved? Then it's a hate incident. So the KKK, for example, rallying in downtown Skokie, I would consider that to be very much a hate incident. If someone is passing out hate flyers, I would consider that to be a hate incident. If they're putting flyers on multiple car window panes or even at doors, that would also be considered, in my opinion, a hate incident, and in the opinion of many. But it's not a hate crime because there hasn't been a crime committed. It still falls under the rubric of freedom of expression, as ugly and abrasive and antisocial as that might be. But the moment a human being or a group are targeted specifically, or their property, in a way that falls under the criminal code, either assault, meaning a threat to you or your body or property, or battery, meaning a physical altercation of some sort, or vandalism, like spraying Nazi swastikas on a synagogue or a mosque, or anti-Muslim or anti-Palestinian slogans, that would fall under a hate crime. And of course, the very extreme sense of that, the injury and the murder, would obviously fall under a hate crime. Hate crimes need to be charged for them to be officially regarded as hate crimes. So I can't just come up and say, this is a hate crime. We will call for hate crime charges. We will call on the authorities to investigate something as a hate crime. You'll see this a lot in our press releases. This is because we've seen some reticence, meaning some reluctance from certain authorities to investigate a seeming and apparent hate crime as a hate crime. Someone is targeted in a traffic altercation and they are faced with racial slurs or anti-Muslim slurs. And then there's an altercation as a result of that. They might say it's a traffic, road rage incident. And what we want to be able to do is to ensure that justice is served where it is seen as a hate crime. What can you do to protect yourself? A, you need to know your rights, and B, you need to know where to go. The first thing you want to do when you think you are being subjected to a hate crime is to ensure that you are safe physically. The moment you can adjudicate your safety, you want to document this as much as possible. Because the third thing I'll add is that for a hate crime to be prosecuted effectively, we need evidence. And so we've had people who would come to us and say, look, I'm being harassed by my peers. They're calling me a terrorist, a raghead, a towelhead, a Bin Laden, whatever. And they've been doing it regularly, and they'll spray it on my lockers in the workers' rest area, et cetera, but they have no photos, they have no witnesses. If they've received emails, they haven't kept them. Their phone calls are not recorded, and so there is no physical evidence for any of this. It doesn't mean that we can't proceed, but it makes winning the case all the more harder. Safety first, documentation second. And then third is reporting. I'm afraid to say, sad to say, that even though clearly anecdotally Muslim hate crimes are at a high rate and have been since 9/11, almost continuously they're underreported based on the official FBI hate crime statistics. In 2022, which I think is the most recent statistics that were published, I don't think 2023 are out yet, we're looking at 1,122 anti-Semitic incidents reported compared to 158 anti-Muslim incidents. That's a tenth. The difference, again, based on us being in the field and observing anecdotally what is happening, isn't in terms of the frequency of the acts, but in the frequency of the reporting. And we know this because I will get a lot of people in the community tell me about something horrible that happened to them last year or 2 years ago. And they say to us in passing when they're talking about something else. And we'll ask, why didn't you report this? Well, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. It's about culture, right? In the Jewish culture, there's a sense of if something happens to you, the world needs to know about it. There's no shame in that. As a matter of fact, this is how we protect ourselves. We need to document it. We need to advertise it. We need to make sure everybody knows about it so that, it doesn't happen again. In our culture, take it on the chin. Be strong. Have thick skin. Don't complain. Complaining to anybody but Allah is madalla. Shakwa al-ghayrullahi madalla. I mean, this is true, but it's not in its place here. And I need to conclude now. I have about a minute. So it's very
Hello. Yeah, it works. Call us. We'll use
Tamam.
this.
I think it's a ploy from Wissam to tell me that my time is up.
Yeah. Gotta cut it.
We need to make sure that there is no shame in reporting. There is no security concern because for some people it's about, safety and security. Recently we had a kid that was brutally beat up in a school and she wears the hijab. And I spoke to the father many, many times and the father remained reluctant to want to press charges or to move forward out of fear that it will bring attention to the kid or to him. We still moved forward with the school. Alhamdulillah, all is well. Everything was taken care of. The victim received justice and will be having sensitivity training for the entire district. So this is great. But it's important that we don't have fear and we don't think it's a shame or it's shameful to be able to report this. Security, documentation, and reporting are the three things I want to leave you with. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أول شيء, first of all, I just want to say Jazakallah khairan to Sheikh Kifah and to the Orland Park Masjid for opening its doors. And, just a quick background, Sheikh Kifah was actually even planning this event when he was in his travels, how serious these incidents that have occurred in this community and how serious, this masjid takes it. Just wanted to make that clear. And second of all, want to extend my condolences, obviously, to the family who suffered immense loss because of a horrible domestic violence incident in our community, and also the hate crime incident that occurred here in Orland Park, where a Palestinian couple was literally beaten by a older man who had racism in his heart and mind. And it's such a shame. Both of these cases are currently being prosecuted by my office. And for those of you who don't know, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, Orland Park being in Cook County, is the second largest prosecutor's office in the entire country. The second largest in the entire country. Why is this important? In Orland, in Bridgeview, in the surrounding suburbs, we have the most dense Palestinian population in the entire nation. In the state of Illinois, particularly in Cook County, we have the largest Muslim population per capita in the entire nation, right here, right? Why is this all connected? When you walked into these doors, you saw someone handing out one-pagers for hate crimes, and actually in the front row here, you have Cook County state's attorneys and staff right here, sitting here. It is important that we engage this institution in both, and I'll talk today about my experience. Previously, I was a domestic violence prosecutor, but also now, recently, one of my specialties is hate crimes. And we'll talk about both. Right now, where we're at, even before October 7th, Ahmed, I won't go into the history because he already talked a bit about it. In just Chicago, just the city of Chicago, from 2022 to 2023, hate crimes had doubled. This was before October 7th, okay? After October 7th, on top of it doubling already, there was a 25% increase on top of that, where we are today. How is this connected? We see this horrible hate crime that just occurred. In our own back door, the innocent child of Wadia, brutally murdered. While I can't talk about pending cases, I can talk to you all about how prosecutions occur of both hate crimes and domestic violence, and let's talk resources. So Ahmed had just talked about the evidence component, right? Compiling evidence is very critical. When a hate crime has occurred to you, call the police and document every single thing that's occurred for you. A text message, take out your phone, start video recording the person who might be doing it to you. Security cameras, alhamdulillah, we have security cameras here, everywhere. Document, document, document. Call the police. I know very much, and I'm going to give right now the first resource for our community, that our community, amongst other black and brown communities, are often scared and nervous. And part of it, maybe we should be, to interact with law enforcement because, hey, maybe I'm going to be the one who's going to get in trouble. And I know in the Latinx community particularly, and some in our community are afraid maybe I'll get deported, right? I want to let you all know that victims of crimes, both in domestic violence and hate crimes, have avenues. Particularly, if you are a victim, say you have been aggravated battery, right? Someone just really beat you up, right? Hard, and you lost some teeth. Let's use that as an example. Our office can certify, there's a thing called in immigration world, U visas and T visas, where if you're a victim of a qualifying crime, even if you don't have legal status here in America, you don't have legal status, that we can actually certify you through our office and work with you to apply with the federal government to get a temporary visa status. The irony here is maybe you don't have legal status, but because of this crime that's occurred to you, you might now have this relief that you otherwise wouldn't have had this crime not occurred to you. This is a prime example of resources that our community often doesn't know about because we don't engage, right? I'm not here to talk about, okay, what we should engage or not. These are examples. Now let's walk through, okay, an arrest has occurred. What happens next? And let's use the hate crime example where someone's beaten you up and you've lost teeth. Okay, now this person is about to get prosecuted. And, eventually we'll go to the trial stage. Maybe the person may plead guilty. And in every single one of these cases, a victim witness specialist is going to be attached to you. What does that mean? This is an advocate in the courtroom, someone standing right next to me here, literally the supervisor of the entire victim witness unit. Again, how many employees is sitting here with us today? Why? Because our office cares about these incidents that have occurred in Cook County. Our victim witness unit has fluent Arabic speakers. Why? Because our office recognizes the immense population here. And Sheikh Kifat talked about this. The unfortunate news, our community is not immune. It's hard to say that, but our community is not immune to being whether the offenders or the victims. This happens across the board. Okay? Now, this victim witness person is going to be attached to you as the victim of the case and give you all the resources. People all the time, and we can talk about domestic violence in particular, say, you know what, I'm afraid to report. This person is the breadwinner. They supply all the money, pay for the kids, everything. I can't call the police and have this person locked up for whatever reason. Well, depending on the type of crime, in particular in a hate crime, if the threat is imminent, we have resources where we can actually move this individual and pay for first month's rent, possibly work with you for other avenues of relief as well. And, we use that example where someone's teeth was beaten up. We actually have partnerships with the Attorney General's office where you can actually get dental repairs, right? We work with domestic shelters where you can actually get a voucher to get clothes, right? There are avenues of relief. You're not going to be isolated and thrown out to the street, essentially, right? We talk about the immigration component. We talk about these resources to say, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to report. And I recognize in this community and other communities as well, people are still nervous. I can talk about resources all day. We say, I like my house. I like my clothes. I don't need new stuff. I hear you. There are still other ways of reporting. Anonymous tips lines, right? And that's for domestic violence and hate crimes, and I'm happy to provide that. But also, orders of protection, right? A lot of people don't know what orders of protections are. And there's two different types. There's a civil order of protection and a criminal order of protection. What are the differences? Criminal, it is what it sounds like. You have a criminal case attached and there's an order of protection attached to this victim. But for those of you in this community and others, some people might be nervous to, okay, I don't want to get so-and-so arrested, whether it's my spouse, my child, Roommate, this is all considered domestic. People often think it's just the spousal relationship. No, it's anyone in the family unit, even if you're not related, as long as they're living with you. There is a mechanism called a civil order protection where you don't necessarily have to have the person arrested, and you can go into court and get a civil order protection against this person. And if you're still saying, okay, you know what? I feel comfortable around them. I don't want them to get arrested. I don't want to be, millions of miles away from them or something, which you won't be. There is a type of order protection called you can have contact. It's called no unlawful contact. You can still have contact with this person. It just means that that person can't do anything unlawful, aka criminal against you, right? These are resources that our community and other communities, especially in black and brown communities, aren't aware of. That people think, if I'm going to call the police, that's it. The life is going to be over, and the dominoes are going to fall, and everything is going to shatter. That's not the case. That is not the case. There are many resources, especially in the domestic violence world, that will help victims of relief and hate crimes in particular. When these crimes occur, both of these types of crimes are often the most traumatic types of crimes that happens to a person's life. I mean, you have to think about this. We use Wadiyah as an example, this brutal murder that occurred. And, inshallah, may Allah give his mother shifa. She's still recovering right now from her wounds. It's our office's job to help the victim through this trauma. Now, we don't necessarily play the social worker. We have the victim resources for that. We also can provide mental health component. But how do we take this victim from point A to that trial posture, aka finding the defendant guilty? Because I will tell you, in the domestic violence world, this is very famous. That, we are actually, trained about this as domestic violence prosecutors, that you have to go lightning fast. Because the longer the domestic violence case takes, the more likely the charges are to be dropped. Why? Well, said victim is no longer cooperative. That they decide, things are difficult. Maybe they, are starting to get regrets, second thoughts. Children are involved in all these questions. So you often see, and what we see, is that certain defendants have, and it's in the legal world, it's called a rap sheet, aka their backgrounds, where they will have like 15 domestic battery arrests. 15, something crazy, like 10. And not one conviction. Not one conviction. And why is that? Because of this vicious cycle that occurs, right? How do we address this? Absolutely, the first step is reporting. And if you can't feel comfortable or you don't feel comfortable reporting, we talked about these other mechanisms of how you can kind of get around that. But still, encourage you to report. Definitely for the hate crimes, please do not be afraid to report. Document everything, help your brothers and sisters in our community, and be able to do that. But in terms of domestic violence, this is one of the most famous crimes. There's a quote for it. The crime that happens that no one sees, for obvious reasons, right? It's much more difficult to collect this type of evidence, but still very doable. Rely on your friends and family to a certain extent. But if it gets too far, right, that's when you can start bringing in other resources, and do not be afraid to do so. Now, the prosecution component can often be scary, going to court. But no, you're not going to be alone doing this, and there are resources in our office and personnel who are heavily invested in making sure that you're secure, you're safe, and your families are safe as well. That's something people often forget about. So I understand that this is a difficult conversation to have, and especially with these types of subjects. But I really want to encourage our community to really push against any type of hesitation it may have, right? Because at the end of the day, what we saw with this recent incident, and a part of the reason why we're having this event, is we don't want situations to result in the worst ending when we could have prevented it in the first place. there are ways, there are resources we have for people, and I see we're having the live stream as well. For those of you listening in, if you are listening and you need help, it is okay to ask for that help. It is okay to reach out for resources. We need to push past this narrative. And, afterwards, happy to address any questions. And I want to also just mention one last thing. For hate crime victims, right? Even if you've experienced one, or, I really hope no one else does in the future, but just for protection's sake, our office partners with so many different nonprofits that we have all the resources to keep and help prevent these and keep you safe. We actually have at the front door these one-pagers with just scanning the QR code with all the resources that our office has, all of them, just in a simple flash. So please get that on your way out. Otherwise, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Fatima, who's going to talk about her experiences and all the resources as a victim advocate that she sees firsthand in the courtroom. I take it from the prosecutor lens, but I always say that these victim witnesses are my legs. I cannot stand without them, okay? I cannot. In the courtroom, these people keep me standing tall and being able to fight for these types of victims. So, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Can everyone hear me? Do I need, I think I. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to be here and talk about a different aspect to what the State's Attorney's Office provides. Like Wissam mentioned, I am part of the Victim Witness Unit. We are a unit dedicated to advocating and ensuring that victims and their families have the resources, have the information, and have the knowledge to help them facilitate the criminal justice system. When we talk about the criminal justice system, we talk about it in a way that, for myself, I've been doing it for a little over almost 10 years now, a decade, and we are immune and kind of at times unaware that the language that's being used is foreign to some people. What is bond court? We don't even have bond court anymore. What's a criminal, right? Yes, what's the Fairness Act? Pretrial Fairness Act, Safety Act, yes. What does that even mean? What does that look like now? What are my rights? And a lot of the themes that I've heard here today in regards to just safety and being able to be safe. How are we able to be safe with our external sources when we're not safe within ourselves? Like Sheikh Kifah mentioned, we cannot change the environment that we are in unless we change what is within us. And this is the first attempt in regards to what we're doing and why we're here. We each have a special and unique gift to offer. But we cannot offer or tap into that gift unless we feel safe and secure within ourselves. What does it mean to be Muslim and be a hijabi and work at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office? For a long time, I was the first and only one in my unit to be a hijabi. What that looks like, what that means. The issues weren't always with working with the coworkers. The issues truly arose when I'm working within my own community and trying to educate and inform about the criminal justice system. What are your rights? Sometimes there's pushback because we don't want to engage with the criminal justice system. Because for a lot of us, we've had negative experiences with that. And let's be honest and real if we're going to be vulnerable, right? It's hard. There's a lot of stigma associated with being Muslim to begin with, and let alone now I am airing, for a lack of a better term, my laundry out and expecting people to support me and validate me when I may have never felt that within my own community. So just a little bit. I am going to share some anecdotal information. So these are cases that I personally have worked with that for some may be really hard to hear. But if we're going to start implementing and addressing problems, then we also need to come up with solutions within our own community in regards to how to manifest and how to engage with individuals and all stakeholders within our entity. What that looks like means we also engage our youth, we also engage our women, we also engage our men, and allowing them to have a voice when that was been taken away. So just a little bit about my background. So I have been in the Cook County State's Attorney's office for almost a decade, and within my role in the victim witness unit, which consists of more than 50 individuals in all areas. So we have victim specialists in juvenile court. We have victim specialists at 555 West Harrison, which is our domestic violence court. We have victim witness specialist at 26th Street. That's where I started. We have victim specialists in Maywood, Rolling Meadows, Skokie, Markham, and Bridgeview. I am countywide. Within the victim witness units, we have individuals that are specialized in courtrooms, and then we also have staff that have unique specialties in domestic violence, sexual assault. And then we also have a mental health unit, which is a unit that I'm part of now. And I will talk a little bit more of what that looks like. And then we also have post-conviction specialist as well, which means once a case is done and there is a plea of guilty or there's a finding of guilty, what happens afterwards. And then sentencing as well, after sentencing, post-convictions. I am, prior to my mental health position, I was a courtroom specialist and a domestic violence sexual assault specialist, and then I was the mental health sexual assault MDT coordinator. MDT stands for multiple disciplinary, which I worked with area north detectives, I worked with our prosecutor, our state's attorneys, I worked with the hospital staff, I worked with nonprofit organizations to identify gaps in the systems for all and any cases coming in. My role as a victim specialist within the state's attorney's office is I only work with cases that are charged. And that is something that as a community we need to understand. I don't work with cases that are not charged and not pending currently within the criminal justice system. And that's what differentiates me from other advocates that are working for nonprofit organizations. And there is a reason for that. Any information that's shared with me is not confidential, even as a licensed therapist. Anything that's shared with advocates within nonprofit organization, that's confidential. Why is that important? There's times when I'm engaging in conversations with our victims, and for the purpose of just this conversation, when I refer to a victim, I'm just gonna use the term she, even though I will bring up a case where it was a male victim, but just to kind of keep it general. We do identify and we are aware that victims are both male and female. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. One of the things that I do now in my role as a mental health specialist is that is unique is I had to be a licensed counselor. I do not engage in therapy per se, but there are times where we are talking about very sensitive matters, and my role is to be able to identify coping skills and mechanisms that individual can utilize instantly to be able to at least regulate. Some of the issues that I'm seeing in regards to being safe enough or feeling comfortable enough to even report a crime that is occurring, whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, hate crimes, is to even be aware that that crime is actually occurring to you. There's so many times where I've met people and they're talking to me, they're like, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe I didn't hear it right. That can't happen. That didn't happen. And minimizing our experiences. And if that's what happened and that's what you felt like, then there are steps in place for you to be able to, one, articulate what it is that you experienced. And there's no shame in that. Sometimes but in order for me to even be able to articulate what I'm saying and feeling, I have to be able to process it. A lot of us are operating right now from a crisis mode. We're just trying to survive. Whether it's everything that's happening in Gaza and how it's impacting us, how we are able to show up for our own families, how we are able to show up for work, that all impacts, and those are things that I identify and I work with when I'm working with victims and families. It's not only are we educating them on what their rights are within the criminal justice system, quite honestly, sometimes it's just ensuring that they are seen, heard, and understood, and that they matter. And this is not just when I'm working with Arab and Muslims. This is when I'm working with anyone impacted by domestic violence, by hate crimes. In addition to my role as a mental health specialist, I do offsites, and what that consists of is I meet people in their homes. I meet people at a coffee shop. I meet people at the masjid a few times, actually, at a church. I meet people where they're most comfortable to share their vulnerabilities. And there's times where, more likely than not, when I'm working with non-Muslims, this is our first interaction with someone that's Muslim. As diverse as Chicago is and where we live, these are our first interactions. And it's an honor, to be quite honest, to ensure that I am not just representing as a human being and allowing someone to feel safe and connected, but as a Muslim, because then I am a reflection of my faith as well. And one of the hardest things that working in my position has been to hold space for people to even feel safe enough to be vulnerable. There's so many times we, like many other communities, to be able to say something happened to me and have someone care enough to do something about it is slim to none. And I'm being completely honest. Yes, even us having this forum here and Sheikh Kifah, a lot of the masajid are doing more in regards to talking about topics. But there are times where I feel like we are being reactive instead of proactive. It's only until something happens that we're having these conversations and discussions regarding what do we even do? What does this even look like? There's a lot of, please report. Yes, now more than ever, we see the importance of reporting these crimes. But what crimes? Are we pushing to report all crimes? What does it mean to report a domestic violence within our community? I've met with women and men. I've had men that were victims of domestic violence. That's embarrassing to say. It's embarrassing to say on both ends. And there's shame and guilt within that. But it exists. And what does that look like? It looks like it's financial abuse more than anything else. Withholding the money, threatening to call immigration if he doesn't give her something or she does papers. It is. It's psychological abuse. It's emotional abuse. When I threaten you that if you don't do what I tell you, I'm not going to let the kids see you. Or I'm going to take the kids away from you. Or I'm going to stop paying child support. Or I'm going to stop paying the bills. These are tactics that we use. I had an amazing mentor that one time shared with me, and I think I need to kind of make it a little bit more halal, but for the sake of this conversation, I will share. Does anyone know how to cook a frog? Or how a frog is cooked? Right? A pot, you need some water, boiling water, and you just throw the frog in. If you throw the frog in the boiling water, what happens to that frog? On instinct. It's gonna jump. The way you cook a frog is you slowly raise the heat without him even realizing it. No, it's not that, Sheikh Kifah. That's why I said I need a more halalified version of my example. It's not that. It sure is. And that's the exact same thing that we do with domestic violence. A person's not just gonna come and punch you in the face. That's actually the last resort. It's until we're able to identify what it is within us. What we are seeking, even in domestic violence, I can give you the stats: 1 in 4 women, 1 in 9 men, 70% before the age of 25. 70% of domestic violence occurrence is before the age of 25.
2/3 people of color, women of color.
And those are stats that are reported. That's what's reported. And it takes 7 times before someone has the ability to go ahead and report a crime, especially when it comes to domestic violence. It's 7 times. What does that look like within our own communities? It's a lot more. I had personally engaged with 210 families in my decade. within domestic violence, sexual assault. What does that look like? And the theme that I have encountered, and I can only speak to my experiences as a victim specialist. I'm not a prosecutor. So I get people when the case first occurs, when things are charges, again, when charges have been approved, that's when I'm called on to kind of connect and identify gaps in the system and then connect them to resources. So I have personally met with 210 individuals within our community. From those 210, the theme has been, this was my last resort. This is my last resort. So as we're sitting here as community members, look around. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 9 men. What does that say? I'm not saying that we need, there's this theme of, well, I can't say anything, I don't want to اتدخل, مش يعني أنا مش خربت بيوت. It's not about breaking up homes. We're trying to prevent that. But then what is my role as a brother, as a husband, as a father, as an uncle, as community members? If we are trying to prevent from going to that extreme, then if I see that my sister, my daughter, my mom, my aunt, my uncle are not doing well, how am I checking in? So I'm going to put the onus back on us as a community. How are we showing up? Or are we looking the other way? It's a lot easier to not know. Because then when you know, what are you going to do with that information? Just like reporting. We can sit here and say, please report, please report. We're going to provide the education. We're going to provide the information. But now the onus is on you that if we don't report and we don't have the numbers to match the services that we need, who are we to blame? Do I need to address anything else? Yeah. Do you guys have any questions?
Let the sheikh.
I said 2 minutes, she finished in 2 seconds. On the spot. Jazakumullah khair all for the informative session. If there's any question in the audience, if not, I have a few to address here. But I'll take the audience first. طيب. أخي أحمد, نحن we've witnessed in the previous presidential campaigns a lot of rhetoric that was used by a lot of politicians that caused a lot of hate crimes on a personal level nationwide, and CARE have issued a lot of reports, and not just rhetoric, even decisions were taken, the ban and etc. And we've witnessed the role of CARE Chicago when you guys were taking, lawyers to the airport and all that. Well, we're coming into a race again. Are you anticipating this rhetoric to come back again? And have you had any discussion of what the community at large we should be doing? What resources should CARE provide? And what's the role of Masajid to reach out to the community in anywhere of awareness?
That's a great question. I mean, you see this domestically and nationally. I mean, right here in Orland Park, you guys are familiar with what the mayor here said in regards to the request of the community for a simple vote for a ceasefire. And he didn't just say no, but he used this as an opportunity to demonize and otherize the entire Muslim and Palestinian community, American community of Orland Park. Nationally, you saw this with Trump. And you'll see it again, 100%. As a matter of fact, he began already talking about a worse Muslim ban 6.0. I don't know what version we're on now. He went through 5 in his first term, if he comes back. He talked about criminalizing protests against Israel on our campuses and sending these foreigners back home, revoking their visas, their student visas. He's made these threats. And if we know one thing about that guy, that he's crazy enough to try to follow up on them when he's in power. Now that's the bad option. The good option is someone who's allowed a genocide to take place and who said things about Israel and Palestine that were basically just regurgitating lies and exaggerations and complete fabrications like the 40 beheaded babies and the rapes and things like that, that also contributed to a heightened Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bias. As a matter of fact, we believe that we can directly link, unfortunately, the situation that happened with Wadi al-Fayumi to these types of remarks from politicians. If not this specific remark from Biden, but the general remarks from U.S. politicians vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine. The one-sided statements that charged up some of these weak-minded and weak-hearted Americans to become vigilantes and take matters in their own hands against the barbarian Palestinians in their community. So the threat is real. What do you do about it? Domestically, you have a lot you can do. You can organize. You can bring your power to numbers, in your numbers to power. You have here Orland United. You have Yusuf Zagar and all of the great brothers and sisters that work with him. And that is a direct response to otherization and demonization, but also it's proactively building the natural responsibility is what it is. It's power, but it's also civic responsibility of this community to finally punch at its weight at the polls, and in terms of making this community a better place for all. Nationally, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do it at this level. We're trying to vote as a bloc. We're trying to pivot ourselves vis-a-vis the collective political rhetoric on Islam, Muslims, and by extension, Palestinians in Gaza as a bloc. What I would advise for you to do here is to stay plugged into these national organizations, and CARE Chicago would be considered national in the sense that we're part of CARE, CIUGC, the coalition, etc., so that you can be well aware of what steps we want to take as a community to push back politically, but also in the PR world. Because guess what? You can't really sue necessarily a politician for saying something and then a crime occurs, because you can't connect the dots in a court of law. Not necessarily. I mean, it's going to be a far-fetched case. You can try it, but the freedom of speech laws in this country are stronger than a potential allegation that this, unless it was something direct. Well, that was a direct, so even that is being adjudicated. We don't know the results of it. Exactly. So that one was, the claim here would be that he actually made that call. So unless a politician is coming out and making a call for a hate crime, but that's not the onus of a charge. It's not that you didn't stop a crime that you thought might happen. It's that you contributed to it or caused it. Right, and that's what the debate is in court, but that shows you the difficulty, with all the bells and whistles, with all the smoke behind that fire, there's still difficulty. So you can imagine if it's just an at-large statement and then someone commits a specific crime, to tie these dots is very difficult. But there is PR and political capital and cost, and hopefully if we get our house in order, we can cause damage in terms of that, penalties for people, for elected officials who make these statements against our community.
Any other question? If not, I'll move. Yes.
Yeah, briefly, we have workshops and trainings and Know Your Rights presentations catered to our communities that we do on a regular basis. We're happy to do it on demand. We have them scheduled and staggered across the community, but we can do them on demand as well. And then also in terms of the schools, we also have workshops and trainings for Muslim schools. In terms of at-large public schools and things like that, it's going to be very difficult to get in through the door and run these culture sensitivity trainings that are not at the heel of an actual incident. Even then, it's hard to get through because schools tend to be very territorial. They tend to claim that they have their own internal systems, and they'll walk you through step 1 and step 2 and step 3 and, district-wide and statewide and city-wide and all that stuff. But, alhamdulillah, we've been able to make inroads. But that one's going to be harder to do proactively.
Maybe a logistics question, Akhi Wissam. In the case of a hate crime that's pending, the victim, do they need a lawyer? And if they don't have finances to cover that, would the state attorney's office, I know they have like these public defenders, I don't know if, and are they on a level to handle such sophisticated, areas of criminal, of hate, and take it from there. So
Hello. Okay. So, shukran, Sheikh Kifaa. So, okay, when you're a victim of a hate crime or even domestic violence, your attorney is us, the prosecutor. You are represented by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. And actually, you hear civil cases, here, Wissam Shahid versus Ahmed Rihab. I'm suing him, he rear-ended me, right? Name versus name. In your case, when you're a victim of a hate crime or domestic violence, it's actually called the people of Illinois versus the person who caused the crime. Why? Why is that? To Sheikh Kifaa's question, the victim is not the person listed. It's the state of Illinois. It's not because, our office is prosecuting you, because how the criminal justice system works, when you have harmed one of us, you have harmed the entire community. You've harmed the state of Illinois. That's why the state of Illinois or the Cook County State's Attorney's Office is the one prosecuting. So to answer your question, Sheikh, when you are a victim of a crime, you don't need an attorney. Can you have an attorney? Yes. Under Illinois state statute, you can hire an attorney to be your advocate in court. However, in the criminal proceedings, I'm just going to be truthful with you, the prosecutor, we drive the ship. They can advocate on your behalf, and I'll tell you right now that every ASA with their victim advocate are beyond working close with their victims and know every one of their wants and needs and desires and what they don't want. But that is available for a victim if they want to hire their own attorney. It is not required whatsoever. But if you are a defendant, you're the one who committed the crime. If you can't afford an attorney, the famous words you hear in the TV show and movies, one will be given to you by the court of law. Yes, a public defender, but you would have to hire your own private defense attorney if you don't want the public defender. However, Sheikh Kifaa alluded to something I want to answer is, this attorney who's representing the victim, I can assure you that the prosecutors in the courtroom are very top-notch. I mean, these are people who are in a courtroom, unlike other attorneys, and not begging on other attorneys. They live and breathe the courtroom, and they know it inside and out. So if you are a victim of a hate crime or domestic violence or any other type of crime, know you are going to be in good hands, not just with that prosecutor. They have an entire team working with them. They have other attorneys working with them. They have other victim witness working with them. They have the resources, literally, of the county or state backing them. So you're going to be very taken care of, inshallah.
and yeah,
Sam, that there is a prosecutor that is going to be able to handle the case. If for whatever reason you feel that prosecutor is not doing a good job, there are channels that you can also you can talk about and do. You also have to, your role is as a victim is also just as important as everyone else on the team. So not to minimize that.
No, and that's important. I'll pass it to Sheikh Kifaa. If for whatever reason you're not okay with the prosecutor you have, you can always talk to a supervisor or part of the team. But know that everyone who's in that unit, who's working on your behalf, they are literally doing it for you 9 times out of 10, a just cause and good-hearted.
okay, we'll take this as a last question from my side, and then you can always talk to the guests on the side after we're done. The question is for Sister Fatima. When I was doing my thesis for the master's, program, was about divorce within the Muslim community and how Masajid handles. I did interview, and we here welcome also Judge Shalabi. I did interview Judge Murphy. I don't know if he's still at the courthouse or not. So he went for a whole 6 months to Libya to study Islamic divorce and all the differences between al-ba'an wal-sughra wal-kubra wal-raj'i, all the details. And now, since cases will pop up in our community more in matter of sexual abuse and matter of domestic abuse, including Muslim families, Arab families, I know there's some cultural background by people who are, hired, who are of Muslim or back. But any of you has taken any Islamic, let me say, training in that? And if not, is that something on the list that the staff or whatever, and we as a council of imams at the CIVGC, we can help in providing something. Is that something that can be entertained or not?
From our perspective, from the victim witness services, I personally take courses just to kind of familiarize myself, not just on divorce and matters of family and how the criminal justice system impacts them, but also on how am I putting my best foot forward in regards to understanding the religious context when it comes to engaging with families, and to be able to talk to them and be the best representative that I can if that service is needed. So again, as a unit as a whole, we do have cultural trainings. We do have that are actually mandatory by our director and other directors before her, where it's cultural sensitivity. In regards to specific rulings on divorce or family matters, that is not something that the victim specialist engages in, but we are well versed in regards to being able to meet people and be culturally and linguistically accessible for individuals being impacted by divorce or family matters.
All right, Jazakumullah khair. Any last question, if any?
I have a question for
Yes, sir.
You should ask it on the mic so it's not here.
you. So I have a question for Sheikh Kifah, because a lot of these domestic situations might come to an imam before they do to law enforcement. So first, my question is do you get, without disclosing any details, of course, but do you get community members that might come to you and disclose their issues? And then my second part is, how do you handle that, and what point do you go from being an imam to being a reporter?
Sure. So there are three categories that mainly we deal with that. Once which we sense a real threat for the safety of whoever it is, and then we just tell them you are calling the wrong number. You need to call either 911 or the lawyer or whatever it is. The second one, which is a real need for a professional therapist to be involved. And alhamdulillah, we have a large number of now services provided by our own community members, and we have centers around us. Before, we used to refer people to Pillars when I used to be at the Mass Foundation, it had 87 or Hickory Hills, I think. But now, alhamdulillah, we have Arab and Muslim therapists. We even hired one here at the masjid, actually. We have a state licensed therapist who handles, mental wellness for the youth, actually. Now we are opening a mental health wellness center, which we have Dr. Abu Bakr Yusuf bin Akhwana Muhammad Salah. He's an MD psychiatrist, and with a team of 6 therapists actually volunteering to be part. We're not gonna do one-on-one in the beginning. We're gonna do like group, therapy. We're gonna do awareness and training as a kickoff. Whenever the thing is ready, inshallah, to open. We've been doing a lot of remodeling, but things are finding. So if we feel that this is something that is not in our capacity to handle, and we have spiritual, counseling. Most of the cases we take are on the spiritual counseling level, and we do offer up to 5 free sessions, actually, in which any family can come, or individuals. A lot of times the female will call and the husband will not show, for whatever reasons it is. So we either counsel them one-on-one, on the phone. A lot of it happens on the phone, and in many cases, the sessions first, it is taking the info of what it is. Then we deal. Is it communication issues? Is it responsibility issues? Is it ethical issues? We categorize, and then we have a process of what to advise, and then following up on time and line. So these are the 3 major categories that we lead in.
Is that true for every masjid?
I don't know. We need to do a survey on that. It's here at the Prayer Center now, inshallah.